Okay, take it away.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking an extra 2 hours. We're going to go ahead, just get right down to business today because we've got a lot to get through. So our agenda, we're going to approve the meeting minutes. If anyone's had a chance to look at those that we sent out yesterday afternoon. And then we'll quickly cover how we anticipate hosting our final vote on Friday. Just want to give you guys a bit of a precursor so you know what technological things you'll need to have ready for yourselves to be able to cast those votes. And then we're going to go through all of the public comment proposals. So we're going to start with chapter 2, go to chapter 5, circle back to chapter 1, and then focus on the all electric appendix. And then we'll just wrap up with a couple of reminders about Friday. So first, we'll start with approval of the meeting minutes. So Andrew.
No, I'm sorry. I'll wait till after the approval. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Andrew. Kevin.
So I'd vote to approve the minutes as presented with one exception. I think in the public testimony, there was comment that somebody was trying to say there was nitrous oxide, there was NOx. There was NOx pollutants, and it came across as there are no pollutants, like capitalized NO. So just that quick note.
Thanks.
But otherwise, approve them as presented.
Thanks, Kevin. What page was that on? Just so we can.
Sorry, of course I just closed it. I'll find it and put it in the chat.
Okay, sounds great. Any seconds to Kevin's proposal?
I'll motion to second as modified.
Thank you, Ron. And then all in favor, please say aye.
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 And any opposed, please say aye. Okay, awesome. If you want to just throw that in the chat, Kevin, whenever you're able to find it, that'd be awesome. Andrew, I'll shoot it over to you.
No, thank you. I know that you all proposed the agenda, and I know that we all got hit, or I got hit with this all electric appendix post public comment period. This appendix appears to be pretty well developed. I don't know what board members proposed it, but it looked like it's been prepared or pre-prepared in advance some time ago, and appears to have been held out post public comment. And why is this being proposed? Why is it even on the agenda?
So Andrew, thanks for your question. I think the all electric appendix was proposed by 2 board members in addressing the public comment. So we had Kevin and Chris both recommend that we include an all electric appendix. And then both of them submitted language that I believe, and Kevin and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, was developed by Rocky Mountain Institute and a couple of other folks. That coalition developed this code language and sent it to us and the board members yesterday. So no, I don't think anyone on the board had seen or had access to that code language, but correct me if I'm wrong, and Kevin, I can pass it to you to add more color.
Yeah, you bet, and that's correct.
Procedurally, how can it even be submitted because the public comment period's passed?
This was a board member requested proposed change based on the public comment period. So because of the public comments, just as we allowed you, Andrew, we allowed all the board members to submit proposed changes to our code based on public comment. The all electric appendix was submitted by board members in response to public comment as a proposed change.
And to be clear, this should not be new to any board members. It was originally sent to the entire board and discussed. It was sent on March 1st. A version of this language was first sent across. We didn't act on it at that time. My opinion was based on the extent of public comment. I knew we had language that was already proposed and ready to go. So since that was a recurring theme across all the public comment to have this appendix, I went back to that language. Talked to the people who had authored that, and it was SWEEP and RMI and National Resource Defense Council and a couple others. So there was a large document that sent recommendations back on March 1st, and we can reshare that document if anybody doesn't have it.
I didn't think this was a reoccurring theme. You make it seem like it was front and center throughout the process and wanted.
Andrew,
There were several comments about it.
yeah, it was a recurring theme during public comment yesterday. Or on Tuesday, excuse me. Carolyn?
Yeah, the only thing I want to add to what Kevin mentioned is that there were a number of local jurisdictions that partnered in the development of that. So it is informed by local jurisdictions as well, not just independently developed by RMI and SWEEP. So I know a number of communities participated in one of 2 cohorts that informed that appendix. And I agree with, I think it's come up periodically. We've raised it as a board as well. I think what my recollection is, we've had it on the plate that if we get through the requirements that we're required to do and tasked to do through legislation, we wanted to take it up along with the modifications component. Like those were the 2 things that we periodically flagged as taking up if time allows before we have to finalize the code.
But given the weight of this, the public's being denied the opportunity to comment on this.
I disagree because the public did comment on it.
No, I think the public comments led to its being submitted late yesterday, post public comment period.
And just as a clarification, I think we're all clear. This is an optional code. It's not a required code. It's a draft. It's an appendix that local jurisdictions can elect to adopt in whole or in part.
That's my understanding as well.
Yeah. So I think I want to move us along because, Andrew, I hear your concern. I think the same could be said to be true for all of the proposed changes that the board submitted following the public comment period yesterday. And so the all electric appendix, while it is long and large, it is not sort of different from the rest of those proposed changes that the rest of the public hasn't seen. So I do want to make sure we have time to get through.
One last question, Kim, if I could. So because this optional and anything optional goes above and beyond the statute, if the board doesn't approve it today, am I correct that the executive committee can't raise it?
I believe that's correct. Yes.
No, thank you, please.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. All right. So I'm going to quickly talk about the final vote process for Friday. So this is not how we're going to vote today. This is for Friday. And this is just so you guys are all very much aware ahead of time how we plan to host the vote. And we're going to use a different process because per, legal guidelines, we need to have all of the individual board members' votes live presented to the public as we go through the meeting. So in order to accommodate that, we are going to use a Google form. And within, you all will be sent a link to this Google form. We'll go through question by question and you'll fill out the Google form, hit submit, and then it will auto-populate a spreadsheet that we'll be able to share live as part of this meeting. And we'll go through this in more detail tomorrow, but I'm emphasizing this because I want every board member to know that you will need access to a computer, Safari, some app that allows you to access the Google form during the meeting tomorrow. We cannot do hand-raised voting for our final vote tomorrow. So just please keep that in mind. Tomorrow we will need 14 yes votes to pass. That is the equivalent for the 2/3 majority. And anything that does not pass will go to the executive committee to decide. Rob.
I will not have access to a Google form. That's a firewall. It's a firewall issue. That's why if it must be done on Google, I don't think I can actually vote.
And I'll add that I have consistently had problems, intermittent problems trying to use Google Forms. Sometimes it works and sometimes I can't get it to work.
Okay. Rob and Ron, can we troubleshoot that offline with you guys following this meeting? Is that okay?
I have another meeting right on the heels of this that goes till 4:30 today.
Yeah, and I'm going to be late for my next meeting.
Adam, do you have a thought?
I could do it after 1 o'clock.
Yeah, I was just going to offer too, for any board member that's not able to access the Google form, you can also just vote aloud and we can record your votes. We wanted to avoid doing that for all 21 members because doing a roll call vote for every vote will take way longer than we have. But anyone who can't access the Google form or is having difficulty verbal voting would be fine.
Rob and Ron, would that work for you both in the case that we can't work another solution out?
I
Yes.
suppose it will, yeah.
Okay. And I will send out the Google form ahead of time. So today, so Rob and Ron, if you guys just want to test it out, and if you're running into issues, then we'll do the verbal voting. Tim?
Why aren't we just voting on the whole thing, given that we've already gone measure by measure?
We need to vote measure by measure.
So that's a statutory requirement, Kristen. It says vote
Okay.
on each element.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I've been doing all these meetings just off my laptop and I don't have access to two screens. Am I going to be able to do this? Just doing the whole vote, just using my one screen? Is that how this is going to be set up?
Yeah, it should be. It shouldn't be too difficult. You might have to have two windows open, Tim, so you can see the slide that we're presenting and then see the Google form, or you could just, if you can flip back and forth between it, we'll make sure we wait till we get everybody's submitted vote, for sure. Kim?
I was just going to say, I am also going to have challenges using Google Forms during the entire meeting tomorrow. During parts of it, I will be able to, but not the entire one. So if
Okay.
you can-
Will you have access to voting verbally? Will you be able to verbally vote in the case when you lose access?
With noise behind me, yes. So it's not ideal, but if
Okay. Okay, well, I think we're just gonna have to roll with the punches a bit because I don't, there's not a whole lot of options that we have. Any and all options we had for voting this way would require a computer of some sort. So this was the simplest sort of mechanism we came up with. The way this is going to look, and we will go through this in detail so everybody is super duper clear on this tomorrow. You'll get a Google form that will look like this. It'll ask for your name, it'll ask for the code section, and then it'll say, do you want to vote yes, no, or do you want to abstain from voting? For each and every section of the code, you will submit this form. So after you'd fill it out for one, you hit submit, and then you'll be brought to this screen that says submit another response. You'll click that and it'll bring you back into this form. Rob?
I might be able to, if I get a URL, I might be able to ask I'll be taking the steps to get started on it immediately since we have to have it done tomorrow, but I might be able to ask for a hall pass to get into Google.
Okay, fantastic. And I'll share that it's not Google Forms. You shouldn't need a Google account to access it. You shouldn't need any special permission. It's sort of like a SurveyMonkey, just using the Google platform.
Oh yeah, no, I completely understand, but I'll still get a firewall.
Okay, sounds good. Well, Rob, I will send out the link. We can send it out following this meeting just so everyone's got it and you can play around with it. Brad?
I should be able to access this, but I'm wondering if we couldn't maybe send out a test link ahead of time, just to make sure that everybody could access Google Forms.
Yes, thanks, Brad. We'll get that sent out today. And then if anyone has any issues accessing it, please let us know. And Chris is dropping some good thoughts into the chat as well. So take a look at the chat if you think you'll have any issues. There seem to be some good suggestions in there on how to access Google Forms. All right, so with that, we want to get into our process for today. It's going to be very similar to all of our previous voting and discussion processes. Each board member, and please make sure you have open the code language proposal doc that we sent out yesterday. Each board member who has a proposal will get 30 seconds to share why they have their proposal. We will be timing. If there is more than one board member that proposes a change to a section, each proposal will get 30 seconds. And then we are going to allow for 90 seconds max for questions, discussion following each proposal before we ask for a vote. And no, if there are sections, and we've been flexible with this throughout the whole process, that need a little bit more than 90 seconds, we will allow for that, but we just sincerely ask the board to please stay focused and not take us down too many different paths so we can get through all of the proposed changes today. We will do the 11 votes majority today to pass all these proposals, and then remember again, tomorrow it will be 14 votes to pass. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. We're going to start with Chapter 2 definitions, and Carolyn, you had the first proposed change, so I will pull up my timer. I'm sorry, I didn't have this loaded, and then we will pass it over to you.
Yeah, and I just considered this a technical edit that was presented by Sweep and Christine Brinker specifically in her edits that just made it more of a definition of approved. Stop.
Thanks, Carolyn. All right, we'll do any questions or comments from the board, Brad, and then we'll go to Tim. Brad, did you mean to have your hand up?
Sorry, that's a lingering hand.
Oh, okay, no worries. Tim, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Just point out, the only book I have in my conference room is the IECC, and the definition in the for ICC and the IECC, and I believe all the others, reads as acceptable to the code official. So I would suggest that we need to maintain the same language for consistency since we go back and forth to the IECC.
Sounds good. I'll withdraw. And we don't even have to vote.
Okay, Carolyn, are you effectively withdrawing your
Yes.
submittal? Okay, great. Thank you for making that easy. We will continue along. So then, Andrew, did you have a thought?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is wrapping up the proposed change amendment that was voted on during Tuesday's meeting. And so this was sort of a two-part proposal. And the first part was changing the definition of the electric vehicle ready space. And then the second part, as we discussed on Tuesday, was to add a definition for receptacle and include in that definition that the receptacle could also be hardwired. Things have changed since then. I've gone back and forth with Kristen a bit, and we've talked to our technical advisor. And so the way that we've incorporated that second piece of the puzzle has changed. So we've kept the electric vehicle ready space the same. And Kristen proposed adding this language here in red. And Kristen, I'm going to pass it over to you and not take up your time.
So the idea here was we were asked to allow provisions to make it easier for people who are planning to do hardwired charging. This carves out an exemption. So this fulfills that desire to have an exemption for people with hardwired chargers such as Tesla or whatnot, while still maintaining the integrity of the legislative language and avoiding a situation where an EV ready parking spot is not actually ready because there's nowhere to plug in. Thanks.
Thank you, Kristen. And I just want to flag that this change was proposed in the same manner in commercial. Kristen, do you want to add any thoughts on the commercial side? It reads the same way, but I just want to flag that for the board.
No.
Okay, awesome. Cool. So we will go to our 90 seconds and Adam, I'll start with you.
I just have a question / somewhat concern. So for EV ready spaces, the presumption is that the space is not, we don't necessarily aren't ready to install a charger yet, right? Like it's just, we're putting in the space. And so how are we going to know whether or not the charger that's going to be installed in that space is going to be hardwired or is going to be plugged in? I mean, I feel like however you do this, if you install a receptacle, you're kind of just assuming that it's going to be plugged in. If you don't install a receptacle, you might be assuming it's hardwired. But I guess I'm struggling with that part a little bit. So if you could maybe help me understand that.
Would you prefer just eliminating it and going back to the original language? Like we were all asked to create a provision for people who prefer to do things like hardwired Tesla chargers. I think that's solving for a problem that probably affects the richest Coloradans who can afford those types of vehicles and decide they want to have those dedicated chargers instead of just a 220 outlet or receptacle. But this helps solve that without gutting or making it a lot easier to have an EV ready space that doesn't actually have anywhere to plug in. So
Thanks, Kristen. Adam, if it's okay with you, I'm going to go through the line of hands here. So Carolyn, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, so I would support this change under the residential only, but modify it to be an exception as opposed to part of the definition. So I agree with Kristen that if there's a charger installed at the time of construction, it would meet the requirements that we intended through EV Ready. The issue on the commercial side is that as soon as it has a charger installed, it qualifies as an EVSC space. We already have substitution provisions in place that allows that to happen. So I think it's unnecessary. And then my third comment is the junction box was more about preventing tampering on unused spaces that do not yet have charging. This is why I proposed the junction box, and also acknowledging that the receptacle is likely to be wasted at a future date if there is a charger installed. That was why the junction box was proposed.
Thanks, Carolyn. So we'll hold on to that recommendation of removing this in the commercial application and changing this to an exception in the residential application. And then we'll continue on through our folks here. So Andrew.
I agree with Carolyn as she characterized it, that many builders are starting to offer EV stations. We do in California more so. And I think the way Carolyn characterized it works. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. We'll go to Ron.
I also agree with what Caroline was saying in terms of this distinction between residential and commercial. And I'll point out that hardwired charging systems are commonly seen in for things that are not Teslas. I have my own hardwired charging just for my Nissan Leaf, and it's hardwired. It doesn't go to an outlet.
Thanks, Ron. And Elizabeth.
Yeah, do we have other provisions in other parts that would exempt you from like let's say, the EV light or EV capable if you upgrade to the next level of requirements? I mean, I think that should probably be a universal thing if it's not already sort of implied. Like if you do, let's, say you do all of the, just as an example, if your requirements can be fully met by doing all EV installed, for example, would that also then preclude any, say, EV capable?
There's a lot of discussion about that in the table 2 requirements that we're going to be coming to.
Okay. And then the only other thing I would say, since this is in the residential section, you do not need to say in residential applications.
Okay.
By default, it is residential.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So I am hearing, and let me know if anybody disagrees with this, that we can strike this, make an exception here, delete number 4, and this would be for residential. And then for commercial, I'm just copying and pasting this so we don't lose the original, we would strike this all together.
I agree with that too.
Okay. Am I not capturing this correctly from any board member's point of view? Look good? Okay. Awesome. So we're going to first vote. Let's go back into our slideshow. We'll vote first on the residential version. And then we will do a separate vote on the commercial version. So all in favor of the change you see listed on the screen, please raise your hand now. Okay, thank you. I've got 18 hands raised for accepting. Wonderful. You guys can lower your hands. And then anyone who would like to vote down this proposal, please raise your hand now. Okay. Okay. Awesome. I see no hands raised. So this proposal passes. Thank you, everyone. And then we will move on to the commercial version. Everyone in favor of accepting this proposal as changed in the meeting today, please raise your hand.
Are we technically voting down the original proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
We're voting to accept this in lieu
And
of.
I would clarify, I had intended my proposal to be residential only, so you guys kind of added this, so I agree with striking this too.
Or did Kristen just withdraw it and we don't have to vote?
Well, we already have our hands raised, so it sounds
Okay.
like 18 out of 18 approve. So I think we're good with this, passes, no problem. And thanks all, and apologies, Kristen, for misinterpreting that change. Okay, and we kept this in the definition section, just so you guys know, because we weren't sure if it would lend itself to adding or changing definitions. So we're going to go back to definitions. So apologies for the brief detour into EV Ready code. All righty, the next proposed change is from Andrew. So Andrew, I will give you the floor for 30 seconds.
We had previously, it was my understanding, in multiple instances agreed to strike solar thermal. And I thought this was just a cleanup. And if it's not a cleanup, it's a proposal to strike it. Because it was A, beyond the scope of the statute, and B, it has unintended consequences, as previously discussed, because it's not PV, it's of different weight and has other requirements that the code does not address. So I thought this had already been struck, but if I'm wrong, I'm proposing to strike it.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. I see a chat from Carolyn in there. If board members want to take a look, and Elizabeth, I'll go to you next, or go to you first.
Sorry, that was an errant hand raised. Not sure how that happened.
No worries. Jason, over to you. Oh, same with you. Okay. So Carolyn shared in the chat, we previously voted on this and voted to keep it for the solar zone. Chris said that's his recollection as well. We'll do 90 seconds. Does any board member want to say anything further? Andrew, go for it.
That may be true with respect to commercial, but that was not true with respect to residential. And because this definition is applicable to both, I would request an exemption on that for residential or 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Carolyn?
So again, we did previously vote on it in residential as well. And the reason for keeping it was to acknowledge that if a builder installed a solar thermal system, it would qualify as part of the solar ready zone, or that the solar ready zone at a future date could be used for solar thermal. So it's an allowance, not a requirement, by putting it in this portion of the definition.
Thanks, Carolyn. Tom?
I'm just echoing Carolyn's opinion on this, that I feel like it belongs in the definition, because I feel like definitions have a life outside of this document. But I would vote down any other reference outside of this definition to it. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, seeing no other board member hands, we'll go ahead and host our vote. So if you would like to accept the proposed change from Andrew to strike or solar thermal system, please raise your hand. Okay, I'm seeing 5 hands. Thank you all. 5 votes for accepting this change. If you would not like to accept the proposed change from Andrew, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 12 votes to strike down this proposal. So this proposal will not be accepted. Thank you all for your votes.
And with respect to the alternate proposal, is an exception or exemption?
Andrew, I think we're going to move along from this one, since it sounds like we have voted on it a couple of times in these meetings, and I think the board's decision seems to be consistent with what we've done in the past, if that's okay, just to keep us moving. Okay, so we're going to go through now the Chapter 3 electric ready provisions. And just Kevin and Elizabeth, so you know your hands are up. First proposed change. This is something that I will pitch for a quick 30 seconds, because we made the change yesterday to the commercial section of this code. the commercial version of this that clarified the exceptions for interior fireplaces that do not serve as a primary source of heating, and then added that second exception for exterior fireplaces or fire pits. We didn't want to assume that the board wanted to carry this through to the residential section, so we wanted to vote on it today. And so that's all I've got, and I'll pass it over to the board for any thoughts or comments.
Vote away.
What was that, Carolyn? I'm sorry.
Let's go ahead and vote away.
Okay. Elizabeth, just check in to make sure your hand is not up for a comment. Okay, I don't think it is. So we're going to go ahead and vote. If you're in favor of accepting this change we workshopped yesterday in the residential section, please raise your hand. Okay, thanks everyone. I've got 19 hands raised. You can lower your hands. If there is anybody who does not want to accept this proposed change, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see one hand raised. Kristen, are you voting against this one, just to be clear?
Nope, sorry, just struggling with computer.
That's okay. It's early. All right, so 19 votes for, this one passes. Thank you all. All righty, we're gonna move on to this proposed change from Ron. And Ron, there's sort of two on this slide here, so I'll give you a minute if you wanna share both with the board.
I don't have a lot to say, just thought we should make sure we have provisions for condensate in cases where the water heating equipment needs it.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. And do you want to speak to the second one about adding the?
I do think that this came up in the public comment from Sweep talking about the minimum dimensions needed because heat pump water heaters at this point in the market are taller than standard water heaters. And so it seemed like it does make some sense to make sure we have the height where we need it.
Great. Thanks, Ron. Okay, any comments or thoughts from the board? Adam, we'll go to you first.
I would just ask on the new addition. I agree with Ron's suggestion to add the new section. I think my concern is more with the wording. I would offer, could we say it as combustion equipment for water heating? Because other water heaters with combustion equipment, I don't think for the definition of combustion equipment doesn't really make sense. So combustion equipment for water heating, I think would make more sense. But otherwise, I support both of Ron's changes.
I'm muted. Sorry, Tim, go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm concerned about putting a minimum size of the I'm not that concerned about the 7 foot high, but a 3 foot by 3 foot space, which AHJs are going to say that's going to be in a room. We've seen tankless water heaters going into a closet, like a closed closet even, maybe, and it meets all the clearances. And we've always allowed, just like a furnace change out, to have an operable door in front to be able to get the piece of equipment in and out and to service it. I'm totally against the 3 foot by 3 foot space, especially as people start to move forward, trying to build smaller homes. I know this would not affect tiny homes, the Division of Housing, because those are typically not even hooked up to gas. They're the ones that we've seen are typically all electric. I'm not in favor of the 3 foot square.
Thanks, Tim. Don, will go to you.
I just want to second that the 3 foot by 3 foot, we just can't possibly put that in there. There are just too many size restrictions. The footprint size of a house keeps shrinking and shrinking every year, not only due to cost, but just people's minds of what they want and need. And there are just so many other options rather than a heat pump water heater, and to strictly allow for that one single water heating source, I don't think is the way to go.
Okay, thank you, Don. Andrew?
I agree with both the prior board members. I thought this had separately already been addressed with adequate space, and third houses are shrinking because of affordability.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And Tom, I'll go to you.
I guess I'm just kind of echoing the models, and I'd like to add the example again of split domestic water heaters, split heat pumps that wouldn't require that additional vertical space.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Ron, in response to any of these thoughts, do you want to continue with the proposal to include this? And I'll move it back to the original.
No,
or any thoughts?
those are compelling arguments. I'd like to withdraw the suggestion.
Okay, thank you, Ron. And Elizabeth, I'll go to you. See your hand up.
Yeah, I was only going to chime in because I think that same size proposal or size requirement is implemented in the Denver code, but only on the commercial side, and it has to do with Denver's desire to allow space for a tanked heat pump water heater. So that's where the dimensions come from, because they do need a little bit more clearance and they are a little bit bigger. So I think that would just then be a question of whether we wanted to provide that same space allowance on the residential side. And I'll leave that for argument and discussion. But if it's been withdrawn, maybe the point is moot.
Thanks, Elizabeth. So we do have the separate proposal for commercial. We'll get to that on the next slide. So for this residential application, let's go ahead, and if there are no other board comments, we will vote on these proposals one at a time, or we'll vote on the first one. The second one has been withdrawn by Ron. So for the first proposed change to add and water heating to the condensate drain section, please raise your hand if you'd like to accept this change. Okay, thank you. I see 15 hands raised. You can lower your hands. And if you would not like to accept this proposed change from Ron, please raise your hand. Okay, I am seeing no votes, so that passes with 15 yes votes. Thank you all. And is this? Oh, that I just made a copy. I was like, what happened? So we're going to do the same thing for commercial, and Ron, I'll pass it to you if you'd like to share anything else, or if you want to withdraw any of these. I will let you speak.
There's nothing really new to add. I guess based on what we hear in Denver, maybe it does make sense to keep the space requirement for the commercial.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Tim, I'll go over to you.
Yeah, I'm gonna make my same comment, but I don't agree with putting the 3 foot in, even on the commercial side. Now, I know that tenant finishes typically have more space, but it's been my experience. I don't know if we have any building owners here that always want to reduce, Kevin, he's an architect, always want to reduce the space that's it's leasable, but non-functional. And once again, you can get the like a tankless water heater going in to serve a couple of bathrooms. I've seen that on some of the tenant finishes.
Thanks, Tim. Don, I'll go to you next.
I just want to agree with Tim. We deal with smaller commercial over here on the West Slope than when we do in Denver, but we're seeing more and more of the tankless and at sink water heating versus a large scale tank system anyways. So I just don't think this is necessary in this section either.
Thank you, Don. Elizabeth.
I'm just going to ask a clarifying question. Is this 302.2, is this the same one where we added R2 or all multifamily basically in this section? I thought this had some more words to it, just the definition of the section.
This is the section in which it's commercial buildings. Yes, and all R2 occupancies. I apologize. This actually is a suggested change, a technical change by one of our board members to update the title of this section to include and all our occupancies. But this is that section. Yes.
So that's a pretty big consideration.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
I think I'd like to withdraw that the water heating equipment space.
Okay. Thanks, Ron. So
I'll just throw out there that, you know, we are dealing with it in Denver, and it's challenging for sure, but Denver is trying to encourage the heat pump again, leaving that space for the heat pump water heaters. And I don't know that that's necessarily the intent of the legislation here.
okay, appreciate that, you guys. So we will not vote on adding the water heating equipment size, but we will vote on the first proposed change from Ron. So if you'd like to accept proposed change for the condensate drain, please raise your hand now. Okay, I see 16 hands raised. Thank you, guys. And then any votes against the proposed change from Ron in the condensate drain, please raise your hand now. Okay, awesome. I see 2 hands. Thank you, guys. So that proposed change passes.
Mine was vestigial.
I'm sorry, Rob, what was that?
My hand was vestigial. I was not voting against it.
Oh, okay, okay. Thank you. Okay, moving along. So this is a proposed change to the additional electric infrastructure section of the commercial electric ready code. And this is the original language that as a reminder, this was voted on and approved yesterday. And so our change comes from Carolyn. So Carolyn, I will pass it to you.
Thank you. And this was a change that was recommended by one of our public commenters. The way it reads, it implies that it has to be both, and that the and connect existing space heating equipment and ductwork is not necessary as an addition, that it just needs to be, do not provide new space heating equipment, and just leave it at that.
Thanks, Karen. Any thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Tim, I'll go to you.
Yeah, that was a great catch. I fully agree with this. I was the one that proposed adding that number 3. And now that I reread it, that's kind of language that isn't needed. It cleans it up, makes it more clear. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Okay, not seeing any. We'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of accepting Carolyn's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 18 hands raised. Thank you all. Any board members who would not like to accept the proposed change from Carolyn, please raise your hand. And I see no votes. Okay, proposal is accepted. We will continue along. So the next proposed change is for the title of the section CE 302.2. This is what I was just alluding to, and this comes from Carolyn. So Carolyn, back over to you.
Nothing to add.
Okay. Any comments, questions from the board on this proposed change? Elizabeth?
Sorry, I'm a little confused by it. Commercial buildings excluding our occupancies that have a gross floor of less than 10,000 and all our occupancies of any size.
Yeah, I didn't catch that one. But let's add that as a change.
So wait.
Actually, no, it's correct. It's so.
Yeah. So I tweaked the language this way, so I'm happy to address it. So in our definition of commercial buildings, that includes all R2 occupancies. And so when you use the term commercial buildings less than 10,000 square feet, that implies also R2 occupancies less than 10,000 square feet. And so I felt that it was necessary to say commercial buildings as we've defined it, excluding R2 occupancies. So just commercial buildings and other R occupancies that are not R2 occupancies that are less than 10,000 square feet, and all R occupancies of any size. So I realized it was a little bit of a confusing wording, but I didn't we didn't know how else to make it clear that we were only the floor area limitation was only on commercial buildings and non R2 R occupancies.
So could you not just delete the words that say excluding R occupancies and still encompass R occupancies that are less than 10,000 square feet, because they're all R occupancies of any size? I find this really confusing because first you're excluding it, but then you're including it.
Yeah, I think that's fine as long as everyone thinks that it would be interpreted as still making sure that any R occupancy of any size was covered under this section. I'm not concerned about that if if everyone thinks that that would be okay, then I'm fine with that.
Okay, thanks, Elizabeth. Adam, I'm gonna go to Tim since he's got his hand up as well.
Yeah, I was just gonna say commercial buildings excluding R, but I think you were just saying that maybe should have said excluding R2. So yeah, I agree. Maybe we can wordsmith this and hopefully get it dialed in.
Okay, so Carolyn.
I think what I heard was this commercial buildings that have a gross square area of less than 10,000 square and all are occupancies of any size. I agree. I think that that's encompassing and doesn't need the exclusion from the commercial definition.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn.
That
Tim?
works for me.
Thanks, Adam.
For just clarity, so this then would apply to an R1, like a hotel, or R4, the group. So that's the intent of where this is going.
Yes, as you guys remember, so we've defined commercial buildings as everything but the 1 and 2 family townhomes and dwellings. And so within the electric ready section, we have a section for all our occupancies in small commercial buildings, and then we have a large commercial building section. And I'm using commercial buildings loosely. So this section is specifically for the small commercial and all our occupancy section.
Thanks.
Okay.
Oh, I'm starting to see why you put that in there, Adam. And I think it has to do with how we define commercial buildings. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. So it was
I
because we
understand
defined
now.
commercial buildings to include. However, I do think still, even if you strike that excluding our occupancies, it's made clear later in the sentence that any R occupancy of any size is covered under this section.
Right. It's double emphasizing that under 10,000 square foot, our occupancies are included.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the
yeah.
only consequence of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
see
agree
why you worded it that way, but I think this will be clearer for the general public.
Yeah. I agree. Now reading it again, I agree.
Okay.
Awesome. Tim, final thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just make a suggestion. I mean, we are kind of beating this up, understanding the intent, but for the other jurisdictions and the design teams that are going to be having to enforce this, well, design and then enforce, it almost makes sense to just create another section. Never mind. I'm done.
Thank you for stopping yourself short of us creating another section. Okay, appreciate it, Tim. All righty, so we'll go ahead and vote on this, the proposed change here. So we'll add and all our occupancies to the title, strike excluding our occupancies in the actual content. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to read it in full and is a little less confused. Everyone who would like to accept this proposed change, please raise your hand. Oh, awesome. Thank you, guys. I see 19 hands raised. You can lower them. And any board members who would not like to accept this proposal, please raise your hand. Jason and Don, I think that might be left over from the yes votes. Okay. As this proposal passes. Thank you, everyone. All right, our next proposal comes from, is part of the combustion equipment or appliances section. This is the original code text currently in our version. And Adam, this proposed change comes from you, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
I would add that this is part of the commercial buildings 10,000 square feet or larger section, just to make sure everyone's clear what we're talking about. So we heard during public comment pretty resoundingly, in my opinion, that it's necessary at minimum have a junction box that is installed in combination with the other electric equipment. And then in number 2, my proposed change was follow up on the workshopping we had started at the end of last meeting, just to include that as well, to make sure it's clear that we're talking about electrical panel space and not actually requiring the wiring itself.
Thank you, Adam. We'll go to board comments, questions, thoughts, and Tim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I've got a question, just how you wrote that, Adam, in particular, the section that says with no obstructions between the junction box and the combustion equipment. What does that look like for me enforcing that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tim. I had been thinking about it more as in like no other equipment can be in between where the junction box would be, but now that I'm thinking about it, obviously like a junction box, as we've discussed before, could be behind a wall. So maybe I don't, do you have a suggestion about how we might address that problem? But also get at what we were, because I think the purpose is that we are making sure that the combustion equipment still has reasonable access to the junction box.
Carolyn?
I think we've used the term reasonably accessible somewhere else, maybe.
That would be fine with me.
So we would replace this line with
I would
junction
say,
box and is reasonably accessible.
yeah, and you can get rid of the comma after equipment, I think.
Accessible. Let's see if I can. Tom?
Just have a question about how to interpret this. And I'm just thinking about large, gas-fired VAV units, constant volume units, things like that. In a retrofit scenario, I could see it being much easier. I mean, your wiring is probably going to be deficient and your overcurrent protection is going to be deficient. But why not just pull new wiring through the existing conduit and replace your overcurrent as you need, rather than provide a whole additional breaker and then abandoning your old one? That's my question.
Any board members want to respond to Tom's question? Tom, I don't have an answer to that question, unfortunately.
I think it's going to be a very, very common question in how to interpret this in the future, but I don't know how to address it either.
Okay. Are there any other thoughts, comments, questions on this? I'm sorry, Tom, we couldn't get you an answer. If I'm not hearing any, we will move to a vote. So I'll give you guys just a couple more seconds to read this and put together your thoughts. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands, but I don't want to rush you guys. So if you're putting together a thought and think you might have something to say, maybe throw your hand up. Otherwise, we will go ahead and vote. All right, not seeing any hands. So if folks on the board would like to approve this proposed change from Adam, please raise your hands now. Okay, I see 16 hands raised. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. If anyone does not wish to accept the proposed change from Adam, please raise your hand now. Okay, seeing no hands. This proposal is accepted. Thank you, everyone. We're into solar ready. Woohoo! Look at us flying through these. Okay, so the first proposal comes to us from Andrew. So Andrew, I'll pass it to you.
This concept was used in the commercial, the certificate of occupancy. Some of these items may come after the certificate of occupancy, and I wouldn't want the shading burden to be implied post-closing that are beyond the builder's control.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Comments, questions, thoughts from the board? Carolyn, and then we'll go to Kevin.
I'm fine with the principle that Andrew said. I would maybe change it to a time of construction. Just because the certificate of occupancy comes at the end. And so if you're designing and defining where the solar roof is, it's going to come ahead of actually receiving that. And so I think it'd be more correct to say at time of construction. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. Kevin?
And I'd just speak, I wouldn't vote in favor of this. I think it gives a potential end run to put in something after the fact that could obstruct the performance of a solar ready zone.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. Andrew, in response to Carolyn's thought, do you have any thoughts on her proposed edit to your proposal?
I think Caroline's intent is at the time of construction, which is what, the time of permit application? Or
That
is
would
it,
be fine too. Mhm.
I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay. And okay. Look good? Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys. So all in
Actually, can I just,
Sure,
at
sure,
the time of the permit application, none of those things exist. Right, they haven't built it yet. So at time of application, there aren't any chimneys, antennas, or building.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Elizabeth?
I was going to say maybe we want to add something about as indicated on the construction document. So either existing or planned on the construction documents. Does that cover everything? So it's either there already or we're planning to put it there.
So I'm sorry, can you, so existing, can you say your suggestion?
Let's say, I think we could replace the text in red with something like either existing at the time of permit application or planned for on the construction drawings. And does that cover everything?
Plan for
I believe it does.
on construction drawings?
On the construction drawings. And I think we defined construction drawings, didn't we?
I think we use the term documents, not drawings. but other than
Documents.
that,
Thank you. Yeah. Look, we get to use our definition.
Planned for on the construction documents. Okay. Look good. Ron, does that solve your problem or your question and issue as well? Okay, awesome. Okay. Any final thoughts, comments, questions? Not seeing any. Okay. And all in favor of accepting Andrew's proposed change that was workshopped, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 18 hands up. Thank you all. You can lower your hands. Anyone opposed to accepting Andrew's change, please raise your hand now. Or lower your hand if you don't want to vote the wrong way. Kevin and Andrew, your hands are still up.
Sorry.
Okay, Andrew, or Kevin, you're voting against this one, just to be clear. Okay, thank you. Okay, one vote against. Thank you all. This proposed change is approved. All righty, so the next proposed change we have comes from Carolyn, and this is for the sort of, well, Carolyn, I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is for part, I can't remember, 3 or 4, where we're requiring reserve space within the solar panel, and it was pointed out to us that if a solar system was installed, this wouldn't be necessary. So this is just intended to provide that clarification that it's not in addition to what is already provided for that solar system, but still requiring it, just as a clarification, because I had to check this, it still requires the space in the service panel, even if this is a shaded home. So thinking through the progression, you have to do all the other things around solar zone if you aren't shaded or don't install a system. And this just clarifies that if you do install a system, you don't have to do this one. Hopefully that makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Ron, we'll go to you for questions, comments, thoughts.
My hand was raised by accident, sorry.
Oh, okay, no worries. Any questions, comments, or thoughts on Carolyn's proposed change? Not seeing any, we will go
And
ahead.
I just carried the definition forward that we wordsmithed on the exception under the general provision. So just so you know, that's where that came from.
Thanks, Carolyn. Okay, all in favor of accepting Carolyn's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, see 18 hands raised. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hands. Anyone not in favor of accepting Carolyn's change, please raise your hand. I see no hands. Okay. Awesome. So same thing for commercial. Carolyn, anything to add here?
Nope.
Okay. Any questions, comments, concerns from the board? All righty. All in favor of accepting this change for commercial, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 19 hands raised. You can lower your hands. And any opposed to accepting this change, please raise your hand. All righty. This proposal passes. Thanks, everyone. And there were no votes for those watching in. No votes against this one. All right, on to EV Ready. So there were a couple of proposed changes that came through that would sort of more or less impact all of the language within the EV Ready code. And so these were pulled out. Rob and Zach, we pulled your guys' comments out to start rather than going through line by line and making every individual change. So Rob, I'm going to pass it to you first.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the concerns that brought up during public comments that we similarly expressed, or by a colleague similarly expressed last week about the concern about concern about theft. As quickly as we'd want the transition to EVs to occur, it's probably not going to go as quickly as that, and putting valuable infrastructure in that is makes it available to theft. I think we want to avoid that situation.
Thanks, Rob. So you're recommending, as written here, that we revert EV Ready to EV capable, just to make sure that
there's some of the proposed. I'll offer my support to some of the proposed updated tables in a moment.
Okay, sounds good. Any questions for Rob on his proposed change? Otherwise, it sounds like, Rob, we don't necessarily need a vote here. We'll kind of cover that.
No, I don't think we need a vote. I'll offer my support to one of the subsequent proposals in the preparedness table.
Okay, thank you, Rob. And Zach, I'm not sure. There you are. Yes. Wanted to pass it to you.
Talking about the gentleman spoke about theft from being EV ready, but then he spoke about being capable also. For me, like I said, to be at least capable to have the conduit in, you don't have to have the wire, but as long as the conduit is there, because that will be a substantial cost on future retrofits if you have to go in and put it in. So for me, I guess I was a little confused by the gentleman that was speaking, because he was talking about conduit theft and wire theft. So.
Okay, thank you, Zach. Any comments, questions? Kristen, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I found that confusing too, and that's why I asked the question about theft mitigation. And in case anyone missed it, we did get a response on that. And it was that by having chargers installed and or the receptacles, that it reduces the chance that someone's going to pull the wires out. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Kristen. Okay, so I don't think we need any votes here, but just did want to offer up this chance for these board members to speak. Zach, did you have something else to add?
I was just going to speak also real quick on theft. You know, when homes are being built, especially in residential, those are more likely to be hit than going into a home and stealing copper or anything to that nature, rather than a EV state or spot or EV capable. That's the cheap wire that anyone would want to steal or take.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Okay, so we're going to go move along to our proposed changes, unless there are any other thoughts from the board here. I'm not seeing any. So, okay, we will move on to our first proposed change, which comes from Andrew. So, Andrew, I'm going to pass it to you.
The use of the term on site didn't seem clear that it was limiting to the same property boundary. And if it's clear to board members, please let me know. I didn't think on-site could be inferred as being in a townhome complex, and that it must be on the same property boundary, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Zach, is your hand still up from before? I think it might be.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna lower it.
Okay, thanks, Zach. Carolyn, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, so I support the striking of on-site. I do think that that's an confusing and undefined word. I would not support the addition of on the same property, because I think property is a challenging term. But I think it's still correct to say other designated parking provided for the dwelling unit. And we used the word, I believe I added the word designated, and so it should be within the construction drawings, as opposed to, for example, on street is not a designated parking space.
Okay, Carolyn. Andrew, we'll go through the rest of these comments and then I'll circle back to you. Don?
Yeah, I think maybe, I don't want to be too restrictive here. There may be size limitations on somebody may have to buy an easement on a neighboring parcel to meet parking requirements. I don't want to be too limiting here.
Thanks, Don. So do you support the striking of do you support Carolyn's suggestion, which was sort of striking on-site and removing the red text as well?
I think I do, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Tim?
Yeah, I hadn't really read this initially very well, but we've got numerous townhome projects, and they have not only the parking in the garages, but they also have parking on the streets. And I have seen some of those being designated to different people, for their friends or extra vehicles. So I would support actually deleting the on-site and not having on the same property. So kind of what I just heard, that'd be my support.
Great, thanks, Tim. Andrew, any thoughts?
What's been brought up has been specifically limited to townhomes. Every single family home and two-family home has property boundaries, and I would caution anybody who would think they can pre-plan an easement on an adjoining property owner to address this. I could support the townhomes, but I would want some sort of exemption for 1 and 2 family, that it must be on the same property.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Adam?
I guess in response to that, I'm having a hard time imagining where a 1 or 2 family dwelling unit has a designated parking on someone else's property. Like that, I think the word designated there covers us on that issue, Andrew.
But striking on site seems to create, it's ambiguous as it is, what is on site for, in this instance, because it's 1 and 2 family and townhomes, and they're distinct types of residential buildings. But to permit 1 and 2 family open up to off-site, I think is what this striking the red would create, some off-site. And I don't think that was the board's intent, except for townhomes that may be off-site as part of the larger common element or community element.
Thank you, Andrew. Elizabeth, go to you.
I was just going to say, would it help, instead of saying designated parking, would it help to say assigned parking, so that it is more clear that it's specific to a unit, whether it's a dwelling or a townhouse? I think you could strike the on the same property, because I doubt that you'd ever have an assigned parking spot that's not on your property. But if you do, maybe that should be considered. And I'm not sure if that addresses the concern about that, but I feel like the word assigned is clearer.
Okay, thanks. Carolyn?
I'm fine with that. I think on this one, I was just trying to make sure we weren't using terms that don't have recognized meaning in code. So I think assigned would be fine. But again, removing the, yep.
Okay, making a couple quick changes based on what I'm hearing. But Andrew, I see your hand back up. So, or Elizabeth, did you still have your hand raised? Okay, Andrew, over to you.
Before we go down this road, can I withdraw this proposal so we don't go down this road?
Sure, you're welcome to withdraw your proposal.
I withdraw the proposal.
Okay, awesome. Lauren, any final thoughts any thoughts or comments before we move on?
Well, I guess if it's withdrawn, I was just having a thought of we're having some conversations where there could be new construction townhomes and just trying to think through sort of the future of shared parking arrangements where I don't have this exact situation today, but I think in several years we may see situations where in mixed use developments, residential units are have sort of designated parking between maybe 5 and 8 in the morning, and they're used for commercial spaces during the day, just both to assist with affordability and density. So it was more of a question, but I guess if it's withdrawn, I'm not sure if that still relates, but.
Thanks, Lauren. And I don't know if any board members want to respond to that question. If not, I think we might continue on. Any thoughts from the board? Okay. Lauren, that's something we'll maybe we can follow up on, but appreciate the thought. Okay, proposal withdrawn. Thank you, Andrew. So the next set of proposals are related to CV 502.1.2. And so these are, this is sort of the section that allows for the substitution of DCFC for other types. And there are 3 proposed changes we received from the board here. So we're going to go through them one at a time. And then we'll have a discussion and I'll be able to flip back and forth between them so you guys can see them. And then we'll do a vote as we have with other options where we vote on option 1, option 2, option 3, the top 2 options, then we'll vote on again. So starting with Carolyn, pass it to you.
Yes, thank you. And I think we heard this in public comment as a clarification that of our intent, which was to allow each DC fast charger to substitute for up to 5 spaces of any type. And so this just makes it clear as to the intent. So somebody installing 10 could substitute for up to 50 as an example.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. Okay, our next proposed change came from Chris. So Chris, I will pass it to you.
Thanks. So as Carolyn mentioned, I think this is reflective of and responsive to 3 public comments we received, one from Tesla, one from a commercial developer, and one from NRDC, just pointing out, that really high increase in value from, installed direct current fast chargers. And, my main edit here is allowing a substitution for up to 10, if that's what it takes to make it pencil out for them and gain that extra, real use case value.
Chris, thanks. Do you want to speak to the strike through at the end too? Because I think that's another major change.
I'll leave that, and maybe we can just, since we have 3 of us kind of focused on that number, maybe let's make the vote about that if we can.
Sounds good. And then our next proposed change is from Brad. So Brad, I'm going to go to you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to provide a little more depth for this. This is kind of to address parking areas where patronage is intermittent, as opposed to kind of long-term. And it was suggested, as noted through public comment, that in these parking areas, level 2 charging would not be used. Having heard the same concern in Fort Collins, we've recognized that in commercial parking, most people can manage about 20 to 30 minutes. 3 to 8 hours would seem unlikely. So as proposed, this just again, providing a little more clarification on sizing of DC fast chargers. Like a 50 kilowatt DC fast charger would provide approximately 80% charge in about 20 to 30 minutes and provides approximately the same charge capability as 7 level 2 chargers.
Great. Thank you, Brad. Okay, so we're going to go back, and apologies if this is for the board. I'm going to give the 90 seconds to speak the questions, comments for each proposed change, because they all are a slightly different in nature. So we're going to start with Carolyn. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns for Carolyn's proposed change, please keep your hand up. Lauren? Oh, okay. Not seeing any hands. So if that's the case, we can go on to Chris's, and we'll do 90 seconds for Chris's proposed change. Please raise your hand if you have any thoughts, comments, questions. Carolyn.
So for both Chris and Brad's proposed change, the component where we increase the number of spaces that can be substituted, I can support that for commercial other than R2 occupancies. But I'm concerned that for R2 occupancies, it's perhaps not the right strategy to allow it to substitute for so many spaces, thinking about future build out and the length of parking. So I just want to make that point. And then to the strike through, and I know Chris didn't speak to this, the intent of this language was to acknowledge that the percent minimums are different based on our code changes for R2 occupancies. So the 20 is the legislative minimum, and the 60 is what we wanted for R2 occupancies. And then the only other comment I have with Brad's change, I know we didn't get to it, but since I'm speaking, I'll say it. I would allow a DC fast charger to substitute for EV ready or EV capable or EV light. And so just being clear that that's inclusive. So it can substitute for EVSE or EV ready or EV capable. I'm only concerned that Brad's change makes it now only substituting for EVSE. And so that would be the only clarification I would seek.
Thanks, Carolyn. Adam, and I do just want to time check, folks. We have about 40 minutes left and a couple more EV proposals to get through. So just a reminder to please keep your comments as brief as possible.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'm concerned about the striking of in Chris's proposal about the last provision, because then I think that would then allow only 20% of space coverage in R2 buildings, which I think we did not want to see.
And Chris, I should clarify, Chris has withdrawn that section of his proposal.
Just the striking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, then and then the other comment was, I think, Carolyn, based on the way we worded this, that an EVSE space is installed is allowed to replace any other type of space. I think that would carry through for any DCFC space as well. And I don't see anything that I would think that limits that in either of these proposals.
Okay. Thanks, Adam. Any final thoughts on this? Yes, Kristen.
Brad, would you be willing to strike the minimum 50 kilowatt, given that the definition of a DC fast charger requires 48 kilowatt? I ask because in some cases, utilities offer lower costs for charging if you're at that 48 versus 50. And I think the definition basically provides what you're going for there.
I think I would be okay with that.
Okay. So we will delete this. Okay.
Along those lines, I'm noting we have other requirements defined, just Kristen pointed out. So I also think the level 2 fast charger, the level 2 charger is also unnecessary because we specify the minimum charging rate for an EVSE in a later section.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, guys. So what we're going to do is I think it would make the most sense, since these are all let's vote on Carolyn's proposed change versus, well, what do you guys want to do? Do you want to vote on each, like vote on one and one and one, or vote to approve one at a time? Carolyn?
So I think I had proposed a modification to the other two around occupancies. And so I'm just curious what you want to do with that. I'm concerned about allowing a 10 space substitution in R2.
Okay. I think we might need to vote on a couple of these different elements, because I think that those are that inclusion is going to be different than what we might be voting on here. So first and foremost, let's vote on Carolyn's proposed change. And I think what we're really getting at here is to add the words for each, so that for each DC fast charger installed, you have that substitution. So we'll start here. All in favor of accepting a change to add for each DC-FC charger to this language, please raise your hand. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. So I see 17 hands voting to approve that change. Anyone that does not want to add the language for each DC-FC installed, please raise your hand. Okay, so this, excuse me, proposal is accepted. So let's go on to Chris's proposed change next. So Chris, before I add any clarifications from Carolyn, because this is your proposal, do you agree with that accept R2 occupancy change in including it in your proposal?
Yes, and then I think what we just approved in Carolyn's proposal meets what I was going for in my first red line.
And I think that it was just for each here. Yeah. So okay, let me just clean this up. Okay, and this has been voted in, so I'm going to turn this black. Okay, so what we would be doing for Chris's is for commercial buildings, except R2 occupancies for each DC-FC EV installed space. And we might need to clean up that language. DC-FC installed. What does that say? I'm sorry. Installed. Yeah.
I think we could basically like merge those first two lines and just like accept what we just voted on.
Okay, I'm just gonna try to do it in here, so we will clean this up later, but for the sake of me getting through this a little quicker for us. So for commercial buildings, except R2 occupancies for each DC-FC installed, they're permitted to substitute for up to 10 spaces of any type when the building provides a minimum of 20% parking spaces as any combination of EV capable, EV ready, EV installed, or for commercial buildings other than R2 occupancy. Okay, you guys can read that. I don't think I'm reading it very well. So if you would like to, so I guess maybe the question here becomes
can we clarify something really quickly? Because the way that that's now worded means that now in R2 occupancies, you're not allowed to replace any EVSE installed spaces with DCFC chargers, which I don't think was the intent of what Carolyn was proposing.
Okay, did I add that in the wrong place? Can someone?
No, I have an addition. So I say for commercial buildings, for commercial buildings, except R2 occupancies is up to 10, and for R2 occupancies is up to 5.
Okay, we might just need to start over here on a slide, and I do know we have a lot to get through. So for those of you who have proposals coming, I apologize, and we're trying to get through this as quickly as possible. So let's see here. So I think maybe first, before I just go ahead and wordsmith all of this, would the board be okay taking a vote between Chris's proposed change of 10 spaces to be swapped out and Brad's proposed change of 7 spaces to be swapped out? I think that's the next key question for commercial buildings. If anyone has a concern with voting on that first, and then we can go ahead and wordsmith the rest, let me know. Okay, so if you would like Tim, I agree. I'm trying to get us through these votes here. So if you would like to allow a substitution for up to 10 spaces of any EV capable, EV ready, or EV installed, if you install DC-FC fast charger, please raise your hand now. Substitution of 10 to 1 is what we're voting on, if you would like that ratio. Okay, I see 15 hands raised in support of a 10 to 1 ratio. If you would like to see a 7 to 1 ratio for DC-FC chargers to be swapped out for other charging types, please raise your hand now. Okay, so I have 3 votes for the 7 to 1 ratio. Okay, so we'll move forward with the 10 to 1 ratio and for commercial buildings. And I'm just trying to think through what's the smoothest way to do this. Because
I think Carolyn's putting something in the chat that might be possible.
Okay. Allie, Molly, Claire, can you guys work on pulling in? Carolyn, if you can keep writing out your suggestion. What we have approved so far is clarifying that for each DC-FC installed, you can substitute, and you can substitute 10 to 1 for commercial buildings. Those are the 2 things we've approved. Allie, Claire, Molly, if you guys can start to wordsmith that, and then let's come back to it. I don't want to waste time sort of spinning our wheels, and then we can present a final product to the board to review before voting on any more changes. Sound okay, folks? Okay, thanks for bearing with me. This can get complicated. So we are going to move on next to the proposed changes for the table. So we have 4 proposed changes to the table. We're going to go again one at a time. And so Carolyn, your proposed change is first, so I will pass it to you first.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we heard yesterday, I think it was Elena from NRDC caught this, that for residential, there's R2 occupancies that are smaller, that might have less than 10 spaces. And there was the concern about not providing enough, at least at a minimum, capable space. So my first change was to add a separate one for R2 occupancies, and it should be with 10 or less parking spaces, not 20. Just the edits and just bad typing, apologies. The other option I thought about was just excluding R2 occupancies from the 10 and under spaces. The only reason I didn't go there is I wasn't going to require an EVSE for the small lots still. So that's why I offered that substitution. My second substitution is commercial buildings, to the point that I think Rob raised and others raised around EV ready, maybe being primed for tampering and wire theft. As long as it's not an R2 occupancy, I was fine shifting those all to capable. And then my final one was just in recognition of Denver's comment about parking structures. I feel differently about some of these. I advocate in particular to address the R2 occupancies less than 10 spaces. Done.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, questions, comments, concerns from the board. Sean, I'll go to you first, although your hand's been up for a minute, so I'm not sure if it's meant to be up. Okay, there we go. Tim, to you first.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not against the changes with the R2, but I'm trying to understand, I didn't know Denver did this, but what the difference between a parking structure, a parking garage structure, 2 or more levels is versus surface lot. I guess in hindsight, when I proposed my change, when we added including parking spaces inside a garage, detached garages and carports I probably should have just said also parking structures, because that's in a way a mix of covered parking, but I don't understand why that difference, why you would on a parking structure need to go up to 30% of the EV capable. It doesn't make any sense to me what that difference is.
Thanks, Tim. Carolyn, before responding, I'm going to go to Kristen and Chris. So Kristen, you first.
I have to say I would not be in favor of lowering the requirements from EV ready to EV capable for commercial structures or parking structures, just because I think you're going to run into a scenario there where you don't have any spaces really available, except for the bare minimum. Thanks.
Thanks, Kristen. Chris?
Yeah, just a quick question for Carolyn. Could you speak a little more to just a zero requirement for R2 with 10 or less, just given what we've kind of learned from the commenters about, use case needs when people are moving into and living in those types of places?
So specifically to the R2 occupancies or
or
all of them. So I think previously we had landed on no EVSE installed for small lots, acknowledging that they may not be conducive. I think the compromise I was trying to offer is for small lots associated with R2 occupancies, balancing the cost of an actual EVSE with still providing ready and build out capable spaces, allowing, recognizing that can then be something that occupants can work with the property owner on to add. Again, EVSE equipment can be expensive. And so when you're thinking about a small lot, I was trying to make that balance. And then for commercial buildings, I feel it can be capable just because commercial tenants tend to be more able to, within their lease, provide for the addition of EV charging as opposed to what a resident might be able to do in an R2 occupancy. So those were the distinctions in what I was proposing.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I don't see any more hands up, so we're going to go on to the next proposed change. Oh, Rob.
Sorry.
Go for it.
This proposal would be my second choice if we did move the EV ready spaces to EV capable. But that's again just based off of our prior request recommendation for the board.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. All right, so again, we have 4 proposals for this, so we're going to go on to the second proposed change. And Cody, I will pass it to you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I realize I'm largely in the minority on this one, but I just wanted to pose this in response to the affordability component of the statute. It's plain and simple. The economics are different from I-25 to the rural corridor, and one size doesn't fit all. And that's why I think we need to maintain that true minimum, the floor, for this standard. So I think this group as a whole has kind of missed that affordability component, and statute demands that we seek to minimize the costs and sets that minimum at 20%. So I think we should be setting the minimum and letting local markets drive this. If one market wants more, great. If one market can't afford it, I believe they should have that flexibility. So I think this section can single-handedly break that affordability component, and that's why I'm just suggesting and proposing 20% EV capable throughout.
Great, thank you, Cody. Comments, questions for Cody? Rob.
Yeah, this would be my preferred solution to the concerns. So this will be the proposal that I primarily put my preference behind.
Great, thank you, Rob. Kristen?
This would result in no commercial EV charging spaces.
Thank you, Kristen. John?
I'm going to agree with Cody, and I'm going to disagree with Kristen. I think the market will require them to be provided, but once again, economics are not equal. We continue on this board. We've continued to hold Boulder and Crested Butte and some of these other communities as the standard, and a lot of the rest of the state wishes they had the financial issues that Boulder and Crested Butte and Denver had.
Thank you, Don. Elizabeth.
I'll only chime in for the R2 occupancy, since the goal of this is not only to make a cost-effective sort of EV ready infrastructure, but it's also to try to encourage EV adoption, and for people to buy electric vehicles, they need to have a place to charge it. Most R2 occupancies, the residents do not have influence over changing something that's EV capable to EV ready or EV installed. So I don't see this as solving that problem for R2. I could be convinced differently for commercial buildings, but I would not support this for the R2 reasons.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. Any final thoughts or comments on Cody's proposal? Okay, we're going to go on to the third proposed change, which was from Chris. So Chris, back to you.
So just really briefly, and this goes in the opposite direction, this is responsive to some of the public comments, just recognizing that, if we were to require one space, even in small commercial, we'd be more likely to see, widespread deployment. And then on the R2 line, so this is adding R2 with fewer. What is proposed here is the same as multifamily, and it just kind of recognizes, where people are living and what their charging needs will be, aligning with what we decided when we discussed multifamily requirements.
Thank you, Chris. Thoughts, comments, questions from the board on Chris's proposal? Tim, I'll go to you first.
Yeah, this is the one of the four that I am in support on. I think it is important, especially on the commercial buildings with the 10 or less, to get one EVSE installed. I think that's a really a good idea in my mind. This is the one I'll be voting for.
I'm going to withdraw my next proposal in favor of this one, Chris's.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Okay, not hearing any. So we will, let's go back to Carolyn's to start. So Carolyn, I know you had two proposals baked into this. Do you have a preference on voting? Do you want to vote separately on different sections of this? Because there was sort of the parking structure piece, and then there was the R2 occupancy piece.
Yeah, I can withdraw the parking structure piece.
Okay. So that would mean Yep, sorry, Carolyn. Don't mean to cut you off.
And then I think it might make sense to address Chris's and Cody's related more broadly to the requirements around EVSE, and then that might result in me withdrawing my R2 10 or less one, and then I think the only other one is to for commercial non-R2 to think about whether we want EV capable spaces versus EV ready. I'm just not quite sure. It might almost make sense to go across the columns and the rows. I don't quite know how to disposition this given the other proposals.
So Carolyn, you made it sound
I tend to discuss. Yeah, I mean, I think generally what I say is I still advocate for very small lots, balancing cost and not requiring an EVSE installed, but I can go with the group vote on that one. And then I think the second piece I was speaking to was for commercial and just allowing the shift from EV ready to EV capable. So can we take those as two things?
Sure. Okay, so
I can't now. Can you hear me now?
I'm sorry. Yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit, but you're back. Did you have anything else to add?
No, did you hear me? I think I said the two pieces are what should be in a small lot, and then my other piece was should we shift EV ready to EV capable for commercial? So can we vote on those two things separately? Maybe as our favorite of the three options.
Okay. I'm just trying to follow along and think what's going to be the easiest for voting mechanism. So I think if I might suggest that we take a vote between the three options. The primary, so we've got Carolyn's proposed change, which includes the R2 occupancies 10 or less, and the shift from EV ready to EV capable. So I guess, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the way that's the most functional to do this, because this gets tricky with all these tables. Cody's proposal is to shift everything to the minimum standard for EV capable, and Chris's proposal is separate to move to one EV installed space for commercial buildings, one EV ready space, and then with R2 occupancies, add different space allocation types. So I think, Carolyn, since you've withdrawn your sort of second piece, does it make sense to the board to vote on these options separately? Option 1, option 2, option 3? If the board does not want to do that and wants to see some combination of these three options, please raise your hand, because I think we need to continue to workshop one of these. Because otherwise this is going to get way too messy to vote on individual elements. Jason?
Oh, I just am in favor of
of doing that. Right. Okay, Rob?
Sorry, I was voting on I was not asking for time.
Okay, so Tim, any final thoughts?
Yeah, so if you're trying to meld three things together and doing line by line, I think we're going to create a mess. I think in my mind, I've been involved in code change process for a long time at the ICC, and trying to do this on the fly. I think we're really getting to a point where, without seeing how each vote, how it passes, I know we get our final vote tomorrow, but I think it's a challenge to see how things interrelate by doing it the way we're doing it.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, maybe we could do a option 1, 2, or 3 vote. And if anybody has a specific combination proposal, they could propose that, and that could be a 4th or a 5th if they exist.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, Adam, any final thoughts before we just move to that?
No, I just think we need to move to a vote, because I agree, if we spend all this time trying to mesh these three, we don't have time for that, and we lose the opportunity to go to all the other proposals.
Okay, so that's what I was hoping you guys would say. That's what I would like to move forward with. So you are going to choose between option 1, option 2, option 3. Option 1 is Carolyn's proposed change. Option 2 is Cody's proposed change. Option 3 is Chris's proposed change. Please only vote once for the option that you prefer. For anyone in support of Carolyn's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 2 votes for option 1. Thank you, guys. You can lower your hand. All in favor of Cody's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 7 hands for option 2.
I think Carolyn's hand is lingering. So I think that was 6.
Thank you. 6 for option 2. And then for all in favor of Chris's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 12 hands for option 3. So in that case, the simple majority would win out here. Chris's proposal will be accepted.
And Kim, I think since we didn't have, of course, the option to vote between Chris's and the original, I think we need to do a vote on that too. That's what we ran into last time with the intent, that we didn't have the problem of that. So I think we need to now that Chris has won that one, we need to vote against the original.
Okay, thanks, Adam. You're absolutely right. We will be voting against Chris's proposed change. So you can vote for Chris's proposed change. That will be option 1. Option 2 will be keeping the table as it currently stands. Okay. All in favor of accepting Chris's proposed change, please raise your hand. See 14 hands raised. Thank you, guys. You can lower them. All in favor of keeping the table as originally written, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 5 votes for the original table. So Chris's proposed change will move forward. Okay. thank you guys. Continuing on, we're just going to keep crashing through these. Tom, you have a question? Is your hand still lingering?
I do, yeah. Before we move on from CD 502.1, I'm curious if each of these lines will be treated as a separate element on the final vote on Friday. And if they're not going to, I would propose that they do be treated as separate elements, given that it's a very broad reaching table to be treated as one element.
Yeah, Kim, I think they should be because they're all requirements for different building types.
Okay, fair enough. We will make sure that happens. Thanks, Tom. Okay, moving on to CV 502.5 for EV supply equipment. Carolyn, you had a suggested change here.
Yeah, and the only thing here is to change KW, the 6.2 kW to the 6 kVA or 30 amps at 240 to match our requirements later.
Thanks, Carolyn. Any questions, comments, concerns from the board? Okay, seeing no hands, all in favor of Carolyn's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 14 hands raised in support. Thank you, guys. Please lower your hands. All not in favor of Carolyn's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, see 0 votes against, so this proposal will pass. Before we move on to chapter 1, I do want to just go back. Allie, Claire, did you guys have, can you let me know the slide where you were workshopping that DCFC section?
It's slide 42. It says proposed change workshopped in meeting.
Awesome. Okay, thank you guys. So I do want to circle back to this to make sure we do cover this. So thank you guys for drafting this, really appreciate. So as rewritten, this now says for commercial buildings that install a DCFC, for each DCFC installed, or each DCFC, oh my God, DCFC EVSE installed, that's a mouthful, may substitute for other space types as follows. Commercial other than R2 may substitute for 10 spaces when the building provides a minimum of 20% as any combination of parking spaces. And then R2 occupancies may substitute up to 5 spaces when a building provides a minimum of 60% parking spaces as any combination of those spaces. Thoughts, questions, comments from the board? Adam.
Love it, except that in the number 1, R2 should say occupancies after it.
Okay, and should this say commercial buildings? There, does that seem okay?
And should be italicized, but we can get that.
Okay, other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Hearing none. All in favor of this proposed change as you see written on the screen, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 17 hands raised for support. Thank you guys. You can lower them. Any board members opposed to accepting the change on the slide, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 1 hand raised. Voting no. Okay, thank you guys.
Sorry, that was just a holdover.
Oh, okay, never mind. There are 0 votes against this proposal, so this proposal passes. Awesome. Thank you, Lotus team, for getting that workshopped while we were continuing. All right, guys, just a couple more in chapter 1. So Andrew, I'm going to pass it to you. I think almost all of these changes came from you, and I would just emphasize speediness since we're getting close to the end.
I know this has been touched upon a couple times, just as the tables have. On behalf of all the home builders, particularly the comments submitted on behalf of all the home builders, it still seems to be a disservice not to use the statutory language and acknowledge that home affordability is to be taken into account in the intent.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Comments, questions, thoughts from the board, and Adam, I'll start with you.
I would just say that I believe we resolved this on Tuesday, and I would encourage everyone to vote against this.
Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Ron?
I agree with Adam.
Okay, thank you, Ron. Okay, seeing no more hands, we'll go ahead and vote. All in favor of Andrew's suggested change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 5 votes for this accepted change. Thank you guys. You can lower your hands. Any board members opposed to this proposed change from Andrew, please raise your hand.
I'm raising my hand.
Okay. So with Carolyn's raised hand, that puts us at 12 votes against this proposal. So this proposal will not pass. Moving on, Andrew, you had another proposed change here, so back to you.
I didn't think the intent was to limit this to engineering analysis. It is very narrow. Design analysis seemed to be more appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Board comments, questions, concerns. Tim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with this proposed change. Engineering will end up costing money from a licensed engineer. That's what that would imply. I think that there are lots of different ways to do a design analysis from various designers. So I would support this one.
Thank you, Tim. Any other thoughts, comments, questions from the board? Kevin?
I would vote against this or suggest a change that it be a registered or licensed design professional, because I think the intent is that it is somebody that's licensed and has a standard of care associated with that. So it could be licensed design professional, but I think to just leave it as design, anybody could draw something on a piece of paper and call it a design.
Thanks, Kevin. Elizabeth?
I'll just second that. I don't think it needs to be engineering, but you know, a better word that that goes along with whatever licensing would be appropriate. So, you know, I would support licensed contractor, licensed architect, licensed whoever, but something just to give that a little weight. But I agree, not engineering shouldn't be the right word there.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Ron?
I agree that the use of the word design professional is alignment with the other things we say in the code, and I think that's a good way to go.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Carolyn?
I think I took it down. If not, take it down.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, a rebuttal on that comment from Kevin, just out of respect. I think that last part of that sentence takes care of that as approved by the AHJ. Everybody needs to trust the AHJ and our processes going through who is turning something in and how we analyze things.
Thanks, Tim. Andrew?
I agree with Tim. I don't think design professional is it's too high of a burden. It permits quotes is a substitute, and one must have some faith in the jurisdiction. And separately, other state statutes define a construction professional, and that could be an alternative.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Don?
I'm just going to agree with Tim also on the, you know, let the jurisdiction make this decision. Design professionals aren't always easy or cheap.
Okay, thank you, Don. So, Andrew, I'm going to circle back to you since this is your proposed change. So, would you, I heard you offer up last construction professional as perhaps a substitute for the word design?
My preference is to leave design, that the design to be prepared by any party that the jurisdiction is willing to accept.
Okay, so then in that case, I think we should move ahead with a vote for Andrew's proposed change. Carolyn, your hand is still up. I just want you to know that. So all in favor of accepting Andrew's proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 9 votes in favor of Andrew's proposed change. All against Andrew's proposed change, please raise your hand.
Sorry, this is Elizabeth. I was in favor, but I wasn't fast enough.
Oh, you were in favor. So that was 10 in favor. Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, now back to all opposed. Please raise your hand. So we have 4 participants that raise their hand against. So neither vote wins the majority. So I guess that would likely maybe default us back to the original.
So Kim, maybe what I would offer is that we could have design, as Andrew has proposed it, as one option, and then have a licensed design professional as the second option and vote between those two? Because I think we've heard pretty unanimously that folks agree that perhaps engineering is not the right term.
Yeah.
But it seems we can't agree on what the right term is. So.
Okay. Anyone else want to offer up any suggestions? Otherwise, I think we could vote between the two Adam suggested.
Is my hand down now?
Yes. Okay. So we will do, then I'll just make this Adams. So now we're going to vote between the two options. So if you would like to see Andrew's proposed change using just the word design, that will be option 1. Option 2 will be swapping out the word design for licensed design professional. So option 1, all in favor of option 1, please raise your hand. Okay, I see 5 participants in favor of option 1. Option 2, if you are in favor of option 2, please raise your hand. Okay, thank you guys. I see 14 hands raised in support of option 2, so we will move forward with option 2. I'm just going to write approved here so we don't get confused later. Okay. And here we go, Andrew, back to you for your next proposed change.
This is straight out of the IBC and IRC that it permits extensions, and consistent with every other general language that we've incorporated, it seems that this must be in here to permit extensions.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. And I do just want to acknowledge that it is 10 o'clock. If folks need to leave, I sincerely apologize. We're not done. If it's possible for anyone to hang out, that's fantastic. I think we're getting closer to getting through these chapter 1 edits. Any comments, questions, concerns on Andrew's proposal? Tim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm full agreement with this. This aligns with the ICC other chapters, administrative chapters. So I would support this. I think we should all support it.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, see no other hands. Let's vote on this proposal. All in favor, please raise your hand. Awesome. I see 19 hands raised in support. You can lower your hands. Any opposed to this change, please raise your hand. And I see no votes against. Okay, wonderful. This proposal passes. Andrew, back to you for your next proposed change.
The documentation at closeout, this is commercial type documentation. This isn't residential type documentation. Most of our documents are copyrighted. We do not provide the things of the type and character or nature that are expressed in the code, such as compliance documents, project record documents, or manuals. Those are commercial specific. Home builders do not provide record documents or compliance documents to other than a jurisdiction that may request something. And separately, the solar language already has sufficient documentation required to be posted, and I think residential should be exempted in its entirety. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Comments, questions, concerns from the board? Adam?
I would just ask, so this language came directly from the IECC, which applies both to residential and commercial. So I might ask one of our building officials or someone else, or Andrew, like this seems to apply both to commercial and residential in the administrative chapters of other codes. So I'm not sure why we would exempt it here.
Thanks, Adam. Tim?
That's a great point, Adam. You hit the nail on the head, so to speak. And it would apply to both. And I've always thought this was a strange section, that who enforces getting that paperwork 90 days after we do a CO, because my staff does not follow up on that, but that's a different story. Sorry.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, seeing no further comments, questions from the board, all in favor of this proposed change, please raise your hand. Okay, I see seven hands up in support of this change. You can lower your hands. All against this proposed change, please raise your hand.
My hand is raised.
Thank you, Carolyn. Okay, with Carolyn's raised hands, that puts us at 11 votes against this proposed change, so this one will not pass. Okay, Andrew, back to you.
I voted wrong. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thanks,
I
Tim.
don't know if it makes a difference, but I was supposed to vote against this. I apologize.
Thanks for clarifying, Tim. So that would have been 12 votes in support, excuse me, against this proposed change, which would still make it, we would still remove this proposed change. Okay, Andrew, back to you.
With the inclusion of reference documents, and specifically the reference of the IBC Chapter 3, and then more particularly Chapter 11, which incorporates by reference itself in the IBC NCA 117.1. Neither Chapter 11 or NCA 117 are referenced in the residential code, so these reference documents would have severe unintended consequences in the residential codes. So please, if somebody can address how to correct this concern in a different manner, please let me know. But what I proposed is an attempt to address it.
Thank you, Andrew. I don't know if any of our code officials or board members have any response to Andrew. But comments, questions, concerns from the board. Start. Tim?
I don't see any conflict with just what's there under the conflict, I should say. That's kind of funny. I think that where we reference the IBC and then the Chapter 11 of the IBC, I should say, in Chapter 3 section in the IBC is strictly just occupancy types. And then Chapter 11 is the accessibility requirements. So it's all based on commercial buildings out of the IBC. So if it's a residential building, by definition, in this energy code, there isn't going to be a building department that's going to start trying to apply commercial, at least not legally, on residential buildings, 1 and 2 family. I don't see that this language is needed.
Thank you, Tim. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns from the board? Seeing no hands, please raise your hand if you would like to support adopting this change proposed by Andrew. Okay, thank you guys. I see 3 votes in support of this proposed change. Board members against this proposed change, please raise your hand.
Hand raised and noting Kevin raised his too.
Thank you. So that puts us with Carolyn and Kevin's hands at 11. Oh, keep your hands up. Sorry, guys. That puts us at 14 board members in support of, or excuse me, against this proposed change. So this proposed change does not pass. Okay, so that brings us to the all electric appendix. And Adam, I want to check in with you here. What do we think? We're at time.
So I think perhaps
vote on this.
I think perhaps the first vote is we just start with our proponents of having an all electric appendix. So Chris and Kevin, make your arguments for why we should have one at all. And then we vote on whether to have one at all. And then if we did, based on the result of that, we'll figure out how to go from there.
Okay, thanks, Adam. Chris, I'll go to you first.
Thanks. So I just heard, we heard overwhelming support from many of our public commenters that this would be something that would add incredible value and cost savings to local code officials. It would be voluntary, and we'd be providing a great service with too many local governments within our larger product delivery.
Thanks, Chris. Kevin, I'm going to go to you next, and then Elizabeth will do the board questions, comments. But Kevin.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree with Chris' characterization of it. I think it's a benefit to smaller communities that can't, municipalities that can't write their own code. So it's just there, it's available, it's optional. And I had posted in the chat earlier that we had seen this on March 1st. It was also in the public comments that were published, I think, on the 21st as well. So it's not a totally new thing.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, board members, questions, comments, concerns. We'll start with Elizabeth. You're muted, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I was muted. Sorry, I don't disagree that this is an important thing, but it does take a lot of thought, and I'm not sure that we can give it the time that it deserves and the timeline that we have. I know we'll have the opportunity to reconvene when we do our next phase with our, what's it called? The carbon reduction, blah, blah, blah.
Low energy and carbon code.
There we go. I think that phase is going to take care of that effort and that requirement, but it's I don't know that it fits within the time that we have right now.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Jason?
I think Elizabeth makes a good point, but I do want to just advocate for just the value of having something like this at some point during this process, because as Mel Yema, our Crested Buttes long-term planner, mentioned in public comment, it was a heavy lift for a small municipality, and it's helpful to have something like this as an appendix. So thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Chris, you're next in my lineup.
Yeah, just wanted to note for folks, additionally, the proposal we received, the actual code language is coming from Denver, Louisville, and Lafayette. And they're all originally based on the Washington State Code and NBI language. So that's just what our starting point is. Totally hear Elizabeth. I think, there might be creative ways to think about going about this, but I don't have a perfect answer, nor do I realize we have time. I realize we don't have time to discuss that now, but just wanted to let folks know where this was coming from and how the group that compiled it put it together and where it's drawn from.
Thank you, Chris. Tom?
Yeah, to that point, and to Elizabeth, I think that language is already easily accessible, whether it's included as an appendix to this code or not. And I just feel like we just don't have enough time to go through and wordsmith it here at this late hour.
Thank you, Tom. Andrew?
I agree this should be deferred for another day, that there isn't sufficient time. Separately, I don't think there was necessarily overwhelmingly support for it. Third, for those jurisdictions in the state that have attempted to adopt language like this in our own internal cost analysis, this incremental additional cost, separate and apart from the adoption of the 21 code, increased cost to at least $9,000. And that was not inclusive of any reinforcing costs that may be required by the utility provider. So this is something of substance that should be carefully thought through, and there just isn't sufficient time. And I would adamantly be against some wholesale decision just to include, even as an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of having language available for communities. I would point out that Lafayette does not have this. They're getting ready to take it to council. So I've seen their proposal, so we don't know what that's going to end up looking like. If you read the council memo for what Louisville went through when they did theirs, there was a huge pushback on that, but their council did finally approve it. And my final comment is, if this gets added into this, I think the people would think that the Energy Code Board, that is our group, have vetted it and approved it as an appendix. I mean, that's what happens when you get an appendix put into one of the ICC codes. The code change committees and the membership all review it and approve it and then modify changes to it. I don't think that this is the time. It could be in the next couple of years in that phase 2 where we have the time, whoever's on the board at that point.
Thank you, Tim. And Kevin?
Yeah, and I acknowledge the timing is very tight. Wish we had brought this up sooner. I understood Adam's question to basically vote on the intent of, do we feel like there could be an appendix in the future? And I wonder if we should vote on that. because that at least establishes the intent of this group going forward and allows it to occur at a later date.
Thanks, Kevin. And I guess within that vote, I want to be absolutely sure we are clear that it's not, if we're voting to consider it at a future date, it's not within this code development cycle. Is that what you mean?
I think that's fair, yeah.
Okay, because this code development cycle unfortunately ends tomorrow for the board.
Yeah, and it's too tight, but I think if we can get a toehold for it to be addressed later on, that would be helpful.
Okay. Okay. So if the board feels that that's an okay direction to take, I saw some head nods. So we will, yep, Andrew.
So why is that necessary? Why can't the board initiate that then? What's the purpose of an intent? That seems overreaching and beyond the scope of the statute.
Kevin, any response?
I would offer it's being responsive to the public comment.
I agree.
And I would also offer that the statute has, if it doesn't end up in this code language, then the statute does not apply to this, whether or not we are indicating support or opposition to do this later. The statute is not going to be involved in that.
If it, a lot of the public comment wasn't incorporated, so why should sweep get extra attention and focus?
Andrew, this was absolutely brought up multiple times during public comment, and I think it's, just as all of your proposed changes were fairly reviewed and voted on by the board, I think it's fair that this, at least the intent of this, because it was brought up by your fellow board members, deserves its fair vote as well. So with that, we will vote if you are in favor of the intent to add an all-electric appendix at a future code development, in future code development cycles with this board. Please, we'll vote on that first. We'll raise your hand if you're against including the inclusion or the intent to include an all-electric appendix. We'll vote on that second. So all in favor for the intent to include an all-electric appendix, please raise your hand.
Hand raised.
Thank you. Okay, I see 13 votes for.
And just to point out, I think Andrew's, yeah.
Oh, Andrew, did you want to keep your hand up for that? Okay.
No, I don't. No, I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so one more time, everyone in support of the intent to add an all-electric appendix, please raise your hand. Carolyn, I've noted your hand is up. Okay, that is 11 votes with Carolyn's hand for the future inclusion of an all-electric appendix. All opposed to that intent, please raise your hand. Okay, and I have 4 participants against that intent. So I'm not quite sure how we'll work that into what our final code package looks like. Adam, you and I can discuss that later. Yeah. Before I let you guys run off, just a reminder, we will be sending you the updated code package with all of the changes we voted on today. You'll get that at some point today. You'll get a redlined version and a clean version. And note that the redline version will include any changes we made in this meeting and in Tuesday's meeting. And the clean version will have all of that finals. We are meeting from 12 to 5 tomorrow. We're going to get through it as fast as possible, but we have that extra 2 hours just in case things take longer than we think. We're not going to be wordsmithing proposals tomorrow. So it will be a vote, yes or no, on each section of the code. So there will be limited discussion. Come prepared, have snacks, have water. Please review the code package if you have time, and just be ready to hang out with us for 5 hours. Tom, I'll go to you, and then Adam.
Yeah, I guess so we'll be spending time here today and tomorrow morning figuring out how we're going to vote on each element. Is there any way you could explain what, or even send an email kind of with definitions? I mean, there's a for vote, an against vote, and abstain. The bylaws, abstain seems to have nothing to do other than conflicts of interest, and a no vote. What do all those entail as we go through and figure out how we're going to vote?
Sure. I'm happy to put together the form that you guys will be using. It'll be a test form so you guys can play around with it. And we'll be very, very explicit about all of those instructions for tomorrow's vote. We'll also include a note for you guys on how we plan to schedule, or like on the section, how we're going to split up the sections for voting. because we've got a specific strategy in mind for that as well. Adam.
All I will say is that we've certainly had through a lot of the straw polling. We've had folks who are in attendance who choose not to vote on particular provisions or amendments. All I will emphasize is that we need every person who is a member of this board to be voting on every element during the meeting tomorrow. If you don't want to vote yes or no, the abstention option is there. But every person, if we have 21 board members in attendance, we need 21 votes on every element. So I just wanted to emphasize that.
Thanks, Adam. And we will be able to track live who's voted. And so we will be making sure we have 21 votes before moving on from each section. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. Just two questions. So I believe that part of the process tomorrow will be the person who made the proposed amendment gets a short period of time to present or rebut maybe. I think that's how that was set up, correct?
Adam, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so Tim, we're not talking about amendments tomorrow. We are talking about the provision as a whole. So there will be no amendments tomorrow. There's no wordsmithing.
No,
I think there will be an opportunity. I think, Kim, we had talked about like ahead of each provision, there'll be like 30 seconds for someone to speak in favor of it, 30 seconds for someone to speak against it. But there will be, yeah, it'll be you're voting yes or no on the provision as you will see it on the slide.
I see. So it could be any board member that is going to make the comment either for or against. And with that being said, and I had sent you guys an email, but is it possible to find out what the initial votes, the straw votes were for the items that did make it in, or is that just not there?
So Tim, it's there, but it was really built as an internal tool for our Lotus team to track the votes. And I don't think it will be useful. I think it will add more confusion if we send it to the board than it will be supportive of decision making. So I'm hesitant to send out what we have because it wasn't necessarily designed or formatted for board consumption.
Yeah, I just thought that the idea, and I understand that a lot of these passed by well over 14. I've never seen a 21 vote, I think, in any of the meetings, but well over 16, 17. And the assumption would be there might not need to be a whole lot of even 30-second discussions, but so be it. We'll be here.
Yeah, thanks for your understanding on that, Tim. I think just with our short timeline, our team doesn't have time to reformat that. But I will say if anyone is interested in pulling that information for themselves, all of our vote counts are documented quite thoroughly in the meeting minutes. So you can reference back to our meeting minutes for that. Adam?
And I would just acknowledge, Tim, that just because amendments may have passed with certain votes doesn't mean that votes won't change on whether to approve the entire provision as it is. So amendment votes may also not necessarily be indicative of how folks will vote on the entire provision. Just to throw that out there.
Thanks, Adam. And there's Kristen, I want to just call out your question in the chat because I think it's an important one. You guys will be asked to include the section number. So not necessarily needing to type out the whole provision, but absolutely we understand that if there's a typo, there's a typo. Each submission will come in within the same, when everyone submits it, will all come in together within the spreadsheet. And our Lotus team will be there to make sure that if someone accidentally had a typo, when they submitted a response for the question, for the provision in question, that we can, we'll make that change for you guys. So everything is crystal clear and any typos we'll fix. So no worries in that regard. Andrew?
What time do you anticipate later today distributing the final?
So we are going to work as quickly as we can with the meetings we have on our calendar to get the final red line changes in. I don't anticipate it'll take very long. I would expect something from our team around 1:30 p.m. this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I see no more hands. So I think I will we'll let you guys all go. Remember, tomorrow we will go through all of the voting in detail. We'll make sure you guys feel very, very comfortable. We won't want to move forward with any voting if a board member doesn't feel comfortable that they know what they're doing. We will send out the test form and voting instructions later today. That might follow the code package, just so you guys know, so we can prioritize getting the code package to you guys. And then Rob, Ron, and Kim, if you guys can just continue to let us know when we send out the form, if you guys are going to have issues, and we will work on an individual basis to troubleshoot with you. If I don't hear from you three by this afternoon, I'll just reach out and touch base.
I'm going to be offline, unavailable until for the remainder of the day as soon as I get off this call. So I'll be working on that first thing tomorrow morning.
Okay, Ron, that sounds great. I'll reach out to you tomorrow morning. And Rob and Kim, if I don't hear from you today, we can coordinate tomorrow morning as well. Okay. Thanks, guys. Lovely spending our mornings with you. Appreciate you all, and enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you guys tomorrow at noon.
Thanks.
Bye, everyone.